What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. I hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Today, we're going to be breaking down each of the 5 moves that the Toronto Blue Jays have made so far in this offseason, and at the end of the video, we'll also try to work our way to answering the question of have the Toronto Blue Jays won this year's Major League offseason. But before we get into breaking everything down, I just want to say that Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro have had an absolutely fantastic offseason. Not just this year, but I think they've done a fantastic job throughout their entire tenure with the Toronto Blue Jays. And we're only starting to see the big moves now with Semien and Springer and guys like that, Ryu last year. But really throughout their entire tenure, they showed how smart of baseball people they are and getting good depth guys and guys who have great value within their contracts. And I think it's finally all coming together. You know, we compare him to a guy like Alex Anthopoulos, and don't get me wrong, the 2015-16 run was so exciting as a Blue Jays fan. But this is a guy who was desperate for his job and ended up trading the entire minor league system to make the Blue Jays competitive for really only the 2015 year and a bit of the 2016 year as well. But what we're getting with this Toronto Blue Jays team is going to be not only competitiveness in the 2021 season, but this is a team that is going to be competitive for a very long time in the division and in the American League. But anyways, let's go to the first move of the Toronto Blue Jays offseason, which was the signing of Tyler Chatwood, the addition of the bullpen. Now, when you look at their entire offseason, you know, the excitement that the Blue Jays have, this is probably the least important one, I would say. We'll talk about Kirby Yates in just a second, but in terms of having Delise, Romano, and Kirby Yates as your 7, 8, 9 guys, the biggest role that I see Tyler Chatwood having is in the 5th and 6th innings, and that's not even counting what Merriweather, Baraki K, those kind of guys who were in our bullpen last year, what those kind of guys are going to do in those innings as well. What I do like about Tyler Chatwood is this is a guy in 2020 that had a 12.1 Ks per 9 and has spent the majority of his career as a starting pitcher. But this is a guy who has great stuff, does walk a lot of guys, but I think he works a lot better in the bullpen. And this is going to be a project for the Toronto Blue Jays. Don't expect some massive stats, but I think there's such a big difference between being a starting pitcher and being in the bullpen. And the difference between only having to see a lineup twice or face just a couple of batters in comparison to facing a lineup 2, 3, or maybe even 4 times as a starting pitcher. And when you have the stuff and the type of pitches that Tyler Chatwood has, he is a guy who could be tremendous out of the bullpen. And this is why we see a lot of starters or a lot of guys just like Chatwood who can't necessarily be good over, 6, 7 innings as a starting pitcher, but could be really good facing a lineup one time through with the amount of strikeouts that this guy could get. I think, again, huge project for the Toronto Blue Jays. Would not be a starter or even have a big role unless people get hurt, and hopefully that does not happen. But it's a project for the Blue Jays, could end up turning out really good and being a good bullpen piece. Let's move on to the second move, which was Kirby Yates. Now, Kirby Yates did barely pitch in the 2020 season, but was one of the best closing pitchers in all of baseball in 2018 and 2019. This is a guy who posted a 2.14 ERA in 2019, had a 1.19 ERA. In 2019, had 41 saves, and actually finished 9th in the Cy Young voting as a closing pitcher. And to get Cy Young votes as a closing pitcher, you have to have a fantastic year because that's predominantly a only starting pitcher award. But I mean, Kirby Yates, for the value that the Toronto Blue Jays have him at, and if he can stay healthy for the entire 2021 season, this is a guy who not only could be a great pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, not only could be a great replacement for Ken Giles, but I genuinely could believe that he could still be one of the top closing pitchers and relief pitchers in all of Major League Baseball. And we got him for under $6 million a year. I absolutely love this move. And again, Delise, in the second half of last year, I thought got a lot better. He's a guy with high strikeouts. If he can keep his walks down, I think Delise is shut down in the 7th inning. When Anthony Bass got hurt last year, who's no longer with the Toronto Blue Jays, but Jordan Romano stepped into that closing pitcher role. We saw the step that he took up. A guy who increased his velocity, strikes out a lot of guys, has a bit of a quirky delivery, but he was, again, fantastic in that 9th inning and closing role for us, and in the setup role when he did that last year for us. And I think having him in the 8th inning is shut down, and then putting Kirby Yates, a guy who for the past 2 seasons that he's actually pitched the entirety of has an ERA under 2.15. I mean, we're talking about a shutdown, and again, in the 9th inning, and this is a fantastic back end of the bullpen. And that's not even talking about the production that Merriweather, Baraki K gave us last year in the long inning roles. I think the Blue Jays have done just a fantastic job really over the course of the past 2 seasons in developing this bullpen. Next up, we had the big signing in George Springer. This is the one that everybody wants to talk about. Say what you will about him being part of the scandals in Houston, but this was the best hitter from that Houston lineup. We're talking about a guy who's gotten MVP votes in 3 different years, a 2-time Silver Slugger, a 3-time All-Star, a guy who in his last season hit 39 home runs, his last full season, in 2019. This is a guy who is a good hitter at the top of the lineup, is a fantastic, probably our best defensive outfielder, can hit for average, can get on base, and is also a fantastic guy in the community. This is a guy who, even if you're a Toronto Blue Jays fan who right now doesn't like George Springer because he came from Houston, this is a guy who is going to be a fan favorite. This is a guy who's been in the playoffs, has a ton of playoff experience, more than everybody combined almost for the Toronto Blue Jays. Great guy on the baseball field, tremendous outfielder in terms of what he can do defensively, a great guy in the locker room in terms of having playoff experience for the young guys, but also a tremendous, tremendous guy in the community who is going to end up being one of the fan favorites for the Toronto Blue Jays. Then we had the big signing of Marcus Semien. The Toronto Blue Jays have been in on a middle infielder for this entire offseason. They were in on DJ LeMahieu, a couple corner infielders as well, Chris Bryant, Justin Turner. They were in on Andrelton Simmons really since last year. But Marcus Semien's fantastic. I know a lot of people were mad. They said that we were overpaying him. I don't really understand that. It's only for 1 year. And if you look at the roster, they have a ton of money freeing up for the Blue Jays to again go back into the free agency market next year and add whatever they need to if that's a starting pitcher or another hitter. But Marcus Semien's a guy in 2019 who had 33 home runs, was 3rd in the American League MVP voting, a guy who in 2019 had a higher WAR than Mike Trout. And I'm not saying that's the production that we're going to be getting from Marcus Semien this year, but he's a guy who's going to be hitting 6 or 7 in our lineup, potentially going to third base or second base, maybe playing a bit of shortstop when Bo Bichette isn't in the lineup. This is a guy who's improved defensively. Again, a guy that we don't necessarily need a ton of production from. Had a down year in 2020, but if he's anywhere close to that 2019 numbers, this is a big, big time pickup. Finally, we have the most recent addition of Steven Matz. I'm pretty sure this video is going to come out on Thursday, so that means the Matz deal would have been yesterday. Now, I think the Matz deal was a little overhyped. I think the overall trade was really useless for both teams. Steven Matz is a guy who had high expectations. He was drafted in the 2nd round of his MLB draft, but has never really broken through. He's a guy who can strike out a lot of people. He just gives up a lot of home runs. He gave up 27 home runs in 2019, 25 home runs in 2018. For whatever reason, was just never able to figure it out in New York. Could he have a ceiling? Yes. Is he going to be in the rotation? Probably no. Is it good to have another starter like Steven Matz who could potentially break into the rotation if a guy like Robbie Ray or Ross Stripling are unable to bounce back? I would say so. I still don't think this is a great move. I was really high on Matz a few years ago, not so much now, just because he's never really figured it out. But again, he's a guy who can get strikeouts. If he can lower the home runs, lower the whip a bit, that should also bring his ERA down. I think, again, similar to Tyler Chatwood, it's more of a project for the Toronto Blue Jays, but he does have higher upside if the Toronto Blue Jays somehow figure it out. In terms of the Blue Jays offseason, it's really hard not to say that this isn't an A-grade offseason. In my opinion, the Blue Jays have won the offseason, have addressed most of their issues besides in their starting rotation, getting a real, 2-type starter. And if you haven't already watched my video on their pitching trade targets, definitely make sure to do that. But basically, what I said is I think it's a lot better for the Blue Jays to not spend money on a guy like Bauer and a guy like Paxton. You package some of your excess outfielders, a guy like Kirk, Teoscar Hernandez, you got Grichuk as well, maybe Groshans. I've even seen Danny Jansen come up in some possible trade rumors as well. You go out there, you package some of those guys, get maybe one of Cincinnati's guys in Castillo or Sonny Gray, a guy like German Marquez, some just fantastic starters who would be really, really quality in the Toronto Blue Jays rotation. You save some money. Again, the Blue Jays will have a lot of money again to spend bullpen next offseason once some of these contracts again clear up after this year. But I expect the Blue Jays to make a trade at some point, either in the early part of the season or before the season. We could, again, we've seen them in a lot of rumors. We could see them make it in a week or so, or potentially in a couple months. Who knows? But I think that besides that, the Blue Jays have done a great job, adding some power to the lineup, adding some defense in terms of Springer to the outfield, and obviously I talked about their bullpen, and I think their bullpen is just absolutely fantastic. So I would call this a big win for the Toronto Blue Jays this offseason, but I want to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you guys think of these 5 pickups that the Blue Jays have made? What do you guys think of what the Blue Jays have done so far in this offseason, and do you guys think they have won this offseason? Are they contenders in this upcoming season? Let me know down in the comment sections below. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more content just like this. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.